From The Australian, here's what's on the front. I'm Claire Harvey. It's Tuesday, September 2, 2025. The identity of a woman accused of spying for China will stay under wraps. That's after her barrister invoked the rape trial of former Liberal staffer Bruce Lehrmann. The Lehrmann trial was aborted due to juror misconduct. ACT Chief Magistrate Lorraine Walker says a potential future juror in the Chinese woman's trial could search for information if a suppression order was lifted. The woman has pleaded not guilty to espionage charges. Those stories are live right now at theaustralian.com.au. Mary, Mother of God, is suddenly a streaming sensation. Jesus and his followers are going off on YouTube. As new generations rediscover the gospel on screen, author Greg Sheridan reveals how women and girls were pivotal to the explosion of Christianity around the world. That's today's episode.
I don't know why, but I was chosen for this.
This is Mary.
Love will cost you dearly. It will pierce your heart. But in the end, love will save the world.
She's the central figure in a Netflix movie that also stars Anthony Hopkins as King Herod.
Let it be understood, I am your king.
A series about the story of Jesus called The Chosen has gathered more than 500 million downloads and is hitting its 5th season, despite the fact its creator, Dallas Jenkins, couldn't get a single studio to pick it up and had to crowdfund the pilot.
If I am not doing the works of my Father, then do not believe me. But by my works, you should understand the Father is in me, and I am in the Father.
New generations are rediscovering the gospel on screen. And there's a new book out by our own foreign editor, Greg Sheridan, in which he explores the lives of the early Christians, including the truly radical ways they thought about women. One of the stars of Greg's book is Lydia, a wealthy woman in the fashion business who lived in what's now Greece. She met Paul, one of Jesus' disciples, and their encounter changed the world.
Lydia is one of my favourite characters in the whole of the Scriptures, Old Testament and New. She's a pivotal figure in history. So Paul went to Greece and he went to the town of Philippi and he went to the place where people prayed. Only women were there, no men, and he preached to them, and Lydia converted. She was on fire with the message of Jesus that Paul gave her. So she founded a church, and that was the first church in Europe. Lydia is a really interesting character. She was a merchant. She was a trader in fine cloth. She brought her household to later see Paul and to embrace Christianity. If she was the head of the household, it was probably an all-female household. So this was the first church in Europe, and it was the first Christian church in Europe, and everything in Christianity comes from that. That's all down to Lydia. We tend to idealise the Roman Empire now. God alone knows why. The ancient Greek and Roman worlds were profoundly violent, profoundly misogynist, utterly hierarchical. Husbands owned their wives, fathers owned their children, masters owned their slaves, and if you owned someone, you could do anything with them. You could exploit them sexually, physically, work them to death. You could kill them. I mean, it was such a misogynistic, such an anti-woman society that it was absolutely routine to leave girl babies out to die because boy babies were more valuable. I quote a Roman soldier. I mean, a lot of Roman marriages were very bad. Relations between the sexes were terrible. But there is a Roman soldier who's a loving husband, and he's going away and he writes to his wife and he says, "Darling, I'll never forget you. You know, you'll always be in my heart and I'll come back to you." And the wife is pregnant, and he just says to her as a matter of course, "If it's a boy, name him such and such. If it's a girl, discard it." So the first great sexual revolution was the Christian sexual revolution, which preached the equality of the sexes, that women and men, slaves and property owners, as Paul famously said, there is neither Jew nor Gentile, slave nor free, male and female, you're all one in Christ Jesus. This radical universalism and egalitarianism just turned the ancient world upside down. In terms of women, there's overwhelming archaeological and textual evidence that Christianity attracted many more women than it did men. You know, there are ruins and remains of Christian dormitories where there are so many more female tunics than male. The first church we know has 7 prominent members of the church inscribed in a mosaic. 5 of them are women. In the early Christian community, because they didn't kill their girl babies, and indeed they rescued girl babies who were left out to die in the elements, they had many more girls than pagan families. So as a result, obviously, they were much happier. What a horrible world it would be if it was just blokes. There was a tremendous shortage of women in the ancient Greco-Roman world because so many of them were killed as kids. So the pagan men married Christian women and converted. But even if you go right back to the Gospels, the first person to hear of Jesus is Mary, a woman. The first person to proclaim Jesus is Mary, a woman. The first person to hear Jesus proclaimed is Mary's cousin, whom she goes to with the news that she's to bear the Son of God. And at the end of Christ's life, at the cross, all the men have run away. They're missing in action. They're cowards, except John is standing at the foot of the cross. But there's a whole group of women, Mary, Jesus' mother, Mary Magdalene, and a whole lot of other women. So the women are much more courageous than the men, which doesn't really surprise you. And then when Jesus rises from the dead, the person he chooses to reveal himself to first is Mary Magdalene. Women's testimony was disregarded in legal proceedings in the ancient Roman world. It was regarded as having only a tiny fraction of the worth of the male testimony. And if the Christian authors were making up a fictional story and they wanted to be convincing, they wouldn't have Jesus appearing to Mary Magdalene. Now, it's true that in church governance and so on, men took the lead. You might well say that Christian churches haven't gone far enough in understanding and appreciating the genius of women. But they were a pro-woman, a revolutionary pro-woman, pro-girl movement in early Christianity. Very, very, very soon, some Christians devoted themselves entirely to the religious life, the Desert Fathers and so on. And the minute this became established, monasteries and the like, there were miles more women than men devoted to the religious life. I mean, in the Catholic Church, there's always been vastly more nuns than there are priests and brothers. It's certainly the fact that there were more women in the early Christian movement than men. And it seems to be an impressionistic fact that women have upheld Christianity over 2,000 years a bit more than men.
Coming up, so could you call Jesus a feminist? More of my chat with Greg Sheridan, author of How Christians Can Succeed Today, which is out now. Was Jesus a feminist?
Well, I think that's an anachronistic question with no disrespect, because the term doesn't exist. It's certainly the case that Jesus subverted all hierarchies, and many of the hierarchies of his time were male hierarchies. So he certainly stood up for women and children. So there's the famous occasion of the woman caught in adultery, and the misogyny of the age is that the man apparently caught with her, he suffers no harm or judgment, but the crowd is going to stone the woman to death. They bring her before Jesus, and in one of the most moving passages in the Gospel, he says, "Let him among you who has never sinned pick up and throw the first stone." And all of the men know just what sinners they are, and they all slowly melt away. Even more radical is his elevation of children, because children, even worse than women, had no power or status in the ancient world. They just belonged to their father or their slave owner, and nobody gave any regard to childhood as such. Yet the most ferocious things that Jesus says are about people who abuse children. if you should lead one of these little ones astray, it was better that you had a millstone tied around your neck and you were cast into the ocean. This is really the most severe threat that Jesus makes, and he's very, very radical in the ancient Roman world. You can see why a lot of Roman writers are very entertaining in the way they write about Christianity, because they said, what a bunch of freaks these Christians are. They don't run away in plagues, they stay and help. They bear persecution with a smile. They're kind to their persecutors. They don't sleep around. They treasure children. They free slaves. Some of their bishops are former slaves. What a bunch of radical ne'er-do-wells these folk are. But of course, this approach to life, as I say, upends the ancient world and catches fire with the whole population.
On Netflix right now, Greg, is a movie about Mary. It's just called Mary, and Anthony Hopkins plays King Herod. It's got quite a good cast, and there seems to be a flurry of screen adaptations of the Christian story now. Why do you think they're resonating with audiences in 2025?
I profiled Dallas Jenkins, the founder of The Chosen. He crowdfunded The Chosen. It's now in its 5th series. It's a TV series about the life of Jesus. It's very good, and Hollywood wouldn't fund it because they thought it wouldn't make any money, not they weren't being religious bigots or anything. And it's now been viewed by more than 500 million people. And this has changed Hollywood's view of Bible stories. One little message of my book is that there is a huge Christian market out there which the gatekeepers of contemporary culture are missing out on if they think it's a drag or something to portray Christian stories and Christian themes.
Greg is one of our regular guests here on The Front, and of course, he's also the Australian's foreign editor. You can read his insightful journalism anytime by joining our subscribers at theaustralian.com.au.